somewhere on the Wildwood Trail.
Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more comic book countdown action.
Woohoo! Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien, and I am here for another episode of my comic book thoughts, my comic book countdown. I got 10 comics this past Wednesday, and I've read them all at last. So nothing compared to the 26 comics I covered in the last video. But some of these were kind of extra long ones that took me a while to read, and it was just a busy week. So I think what struck me most this time around was color, which I guess I've talked about many times before, but I really kind of started thinking color is so different so handled differently in so many different comics, each with its own way of handling color, that in some ways it sometimes feels like there's even more variety to the ways of using color in comics right now than in the line art. And I may or may not be wrong about that, but it just felt that way to me this week. And I think I enjoyed every single one of these 10 comics I read in its own way, but I do rank them in totally subjective, based purely on my own level of enjoyment at the time I read them, rather than anything critical or not a critical starting point. The starting point is my enjoyment. So with that, in at number 10, the comic I guess I enjoyed the least, although I had an okay time reading it, was the Sumerian, The Man-Eaters of Zambulia, which is actually based on the Robert E. Howard story. That's not quite that name. Let's see. Shadows in Zambulia, which I think is a much better name, Shadows in Zambulia. I think the best part of this story is the Robert E. Howard story, like the actual bones of the plot and characterization here is what is the standout, and that already existed in the Robert E. Howard stories, which I've read a number of times in my youth. And I've seen these stories done before by Roy Thomas, and I'm not sure if I've read a Kurt Busiek version of this story, but the Roy Thomas version was illustrated by Neil Adams, and it was highly impactful, and this I felt had so much less impact on the artistic level. At times he's kind of this artist Grist or something like that. Let's see, what's the name? Guess. The artist is named Gess, and he's also the scripter, the person who adapted the story. He does some interesting like architectural drawings, and he has some interesting layouts, but the quality of his actual illustrations is very spotty. There's some good moments and some weak moments. And for some, like they sort of advertise these as the more sexual, more unedited version of Conan because it comes from the European market. And so this character, the female character here, is naked the entire time in the story. But she's not drawn with much va-va-voom or other interest. I don't know. It just seems like she lacks impact. And a lot of the pictures of Conan to me looked a bit goofy. But a lot of this was my comparison to my memories of the original Neil Adams artwork. Or I shouldn't say the original. The first version I ever read of this story was the version drawn by Neil Adams, and that I sort of needed this to do something special visually for me to care about it a whole lot. So that's why it came in at last place. Arguably, the vampiress Carmilla should have been in last place. I put it at number 9. I think I got a kick out of looking at all the different art styles within this comic. You know, it's like a old creepier, eerier Vampirilla magazine with all these short stories introduced by the vampiress. And it's fun to see all the different art styles and see the black and white art. And some of these artists have very interesting or impressive styles like this artist here, and that is Santos Zambulos, and there's this artist Nick Paulwicki who really evokes kind of the Bronze Age Marvel kind of style in a way. And then there is probably my favorite artist of all here was Reno Menke. I don't know if the art is very clear here, but I think this was the story about the president whose wife becomes a vampire, and then the president kills her and then kills himself, but I'm spoiling it, he comes back at the end as a vampire to give the State of the Union speech. And that is about the cleverest story in this comic. The reason I rank it pretty low, and I've been kind of up and down with these Warrant comics, whether I rank them kind of high or low, I guess might depend on my mood, but all the stories, the actual plots, and the twist surprise endings struck me as really dumb. And the other thing is, this is their version of Vampirilla, right, in a way. And it has a really sexy cover. But maybe they could have made up for the dumbness if it were a more sensual comic book, if that makes sense, if the horror had more of a creepy sexuality to it or something. But there's nothing in any of these stories that do that. They're just sort of goofy, childish stories, really. I said I enjoyed everything I read, so it's not to say I wouldn't pick up some other issues of Vampirist Carmilla. Warrant also does The Creeps, which is going to change its name to Shudder, I guess for legal reasons. And when they just had The Creeps, I think I liked it more. I think their talent pool is spread too thin between two magazines. That's one of my theories. Okay, in at number 8 is the Heroes Union from what they call Binge Comics, the Binge Age of Comics, the 20th century's greatest heroes, the Heroes Union, a binge book. I wanted to love this. This has fantastic Silver and Bronze Age style, maybe more Bronze Age style, art from Ron Frenz, and some of it is inked by Sal Buscema, and it looks gorgeous. I like the way the colorist did what looks like classic Bronze Age coloring, but kind of gave it a little bit of extra oomph with judicious uses of gradients and lighting changes in places that the old colorists wouldn't have had time or the ability to do. So it was a really nice package. It's 3 times the size of a regular comic. I think it was over 60 pages. And so I really enjoyed looking at it. I enjoyed flipping through it. I'm enjoying flipping through it right now. But it really got off to a slow start. It was kind of dull and boring and just without the pizzazz of the better Bronze Age comics. There wasn't much. It was trying hard, and it was trying to set up a lot of characters within these 60 pages. And it's written by Roger Stern, of all people, but co-plotted with Roger Stern and Darren Henry. And I'm just guessing that Darren Henry is also the publisher. It says characters designed by Darren Henry and Ron Frenz. And kind of bizarrely, all the characters have names that relate to Wall Street and big business. And yet it's called the Heroes Union. So I don't know what's going on there. So we got the Blue Baron, the Boomer, the Bull, the Crash, Honcho, Protege, Raider, Skyrocket, Strike. So I kind of imagine this is someone who made a lot of money on the stock market and has started his own company and is bringing back these great artists of the Bronze Age and beyond because they're available if you can pay them. for whatever ridiculous reason, the comic book industry does not make use of the skills of people like Ron Frenz anymore. And it looks like the next issue is going to be written by David Michelinie, who is also a stalwart of Bronze Age and into the whatever the ages that came after that, the Image Age writing, but has disappeared from the market. But it makes me feel like if they're going to have a different writer on every issue, like I would have liked to seen Roger Stern build on what he set up here and move on from there, and maybe the second and third issue would be better. Because it reminds me of comics when I was a kid. I was always least impressed by the first issue and the origin issue and that sort of thing. And it was always once the writer built things up that things got more interesting. This they also have coming up a comics based on individual heroes. They have a comic for Startup, who I think is the Flash-like character, a female, and for the Blue Baron, who is their leader and sort of a Superman-like character, I guess. An intriguing thing about the Blue Baron is people think he's immortal, but actually there have been generations of different Blue Barons taking on the job. So I don't know. It's interesting, and I'm going to keep an eye on these comics because I really do want comics that are more retro, if you will, if they were done well. And it took me several tries to get all the way through it. But in the end, by the very end of the comic, I was having a bit more fun. And then I was kind of sad that Roger Stern won't be continuing it. But who knows? David Michelinie might do an excellent job. And I think it's great that someone has this concept. It does strike me sometimes I'll hear interviews with the writers of yore, like David Michelinie. In fact, I think I've heard him say this, and probably some others, that, would you like to write some comics? And they'll say something like, well, no one's asked me to. And I feel like the modern writers don't wait to be asked. They get a comic book project going and they go to Image or whatever. I remember hearing another writer from the Bronze Age saying, I don't know if I could write comics anymore because I have to keep up with all the changes that have gone on with all the characters that I used to know. But that's assuming that the only writing of comics to be done is at Marvel or DC, whereas there's so many more opportunities. If you're Roger Stern or David Michelinie or some other writer who a lot of us still remember, or artist, I think you could start a comic book at Image or somewhere else, or like here, and have a lot of people give it a try. It's kind of too bad in a way that this isn't better, because I think this would have been the chance to get a lot of people wanting those writers and those artists again. But we'll see. I hope it's successful, because I hope to read more. Gamma Flight number 3 was actually a big improvement over 1 and 2, and I've already based on those, told my shop to drop this off my pull list, but I might keep checking it out. I feel it is drawing directly off of the Immortal Hulk run and would probably make a lot less sense to you if you haven't read at least a good portion of that run. Like, for instance, it's really useful to remember who General Fortean is, and that plays a big role in kind of the twist reveal at the end of this comic. So yeah, I'm having a bit more hope for this. It's not as good as the best of the Immortal Hulk, but of course the Immortal Hulk is kind of maybe flattened out towards the end anyway, so I might keep up with the Gamma Flight. I haven't decided. So that was at number 7. At number 6 was Time Before Time. I don't have a whole lot new to say about this. My reaction to it's about the same as the last 2 issues. This is issue 4, yeah. This is developed into a fun time travel crime caper, so to speak, with maybe a bit of the edge that we felt in issue 1 is coming back a little bit in issue 2 in terms of the tragedy of lives being that are scooped up within this kind of time travel crime syndicates kind of thing. I was talking about color, and each one of those things each one that I've just showed you, well, including a black and white one, had very different color, and this has very different color. It's by Chris O'Halloran, and it's different, the color, and the color is different than Chris O'Halloran in other comics I read, like he's the regular colorist in Ice Cream Man. But and at a glance, I think, wow, this is really cool coloring, and I like this kind of minimalistic art. But there's something about it, like some kind of haze or gradient, or not gradient, but some kind of screen over things that somehow makes the colors not pop individually from each other. I mean, one exception might be this panel with the pink there. I really like that. It goes well with the black silhouettes. But I often realized my eye had trouble transferring from background to foreground. The foreground felt backgroundy somehow, the same as the background, sort of. There's something that in the processing of the color on the computer that makes the foreground and background too similar. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't understand, because they're obviously very different colors, why they still kind of blur to my eye. And totally different color in Superman Woman of Tomorrow, number 3 of 8. Interesting that they would do 8 issues. Does that mean they'll do 2 4-issue volumes for the trade, or 1 8-issue volume? And I put this at number 5. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Not quite as much as number 1, but quite a bit more than number 2. And so I think we're seeing a pattern where every issue Supergirl and her sidekick, this girl whose name I can't remember at the moment, who's also our narrator, go to a different planet or a different situation. And this time they're on a planet where no one wants to talk about certain things. And we eventually uncover kind of a horrific truth about what they did with their minority population, who they never treated as well. And I guess we're supposed to feel kind of superior to them, but in a way, throughout history, humans have done the same things on our planet. And maybe that's what Tom King makes us want to think. But Supergirl and the other woman are supposed to be somehow superior to the people on this planet. What they did is well, no, I don't want to give it away. But anyway, fantastic art by Bilquis Evely, which is a strong part of why I rate this pretty high. Tom King's writing is not annoying me as much as it does elsewhere, but it's also perhaps, I don't know. It's also maybe less experimental. Maybe that's good, though. The coloring, as you can see, is pretty amazing, and certainly none of that kind of problem that I had on that Time Before Time book with things blending together too much in some way. Everything, there's lots of different colors, and everything feels balanced and well worked out. The colorist is Lopez. Where are the? I can see his last name on the cover, but not his first. Mateus Lopez. So very pleasing visually, that comic. And at number 4 is probably the comic that scared me the most this week as I was reading it, Eat the Rich. I mean, the cover's obviously good things are not going to happen. And so far, it's more like Eat the Poor, I guess. So the feeling of tension that built up during the course of the 20 or 22 pages here was very strong with me, and I felt more and more tense as we moved into it. And I actually, once we found out the specifics of the horrificness, it was horrible, but I wasn't that surprised because of the title, Eat the Rich, and the cover. I was expecting something like that. So it was almost a relief to get to it and get over it. But I'm looking forward to reading more issues. It also has cool art and yet another very different coloring style. Now, I kind of wish the coloring in Time Before Time was a bit more along these lines, because It's not complex coloring, but the color choices are very effective and help the storytelling a lot, and are pleasing to the eye. So yeah, a good horror comic, basically. Do I think the rich eat the poor? Generally, no. But I suppose there are some cases where metaphorically that happens. The God of Tremors, I'm putting in at number 3. In some ways, this is really wonderful because it's a $7 comic, but what you get is a graphic novel in the roughly European album size for your $7. And at a guess, it's about 45 pages long. And it has excellent art by Peter Kowalski, who is a very underrated comic book artist who shows up all over the place. Most recently, he was in that comic that was about Join the Future. He did the comic. He did the art in Join the Future, and this time he's teamed up with Peter Milligan, and he has done a comic with Peter Milligan before. I think they were at Dynamite at the time, and I can't remember the name of it anymore. But this is also kind of a creepy story, but it has a happy ending. I'll just say that. But it of sorts anyway. But it takes place in somewhere in the 1800s in England, and involves a guy with a very religious father who is against science and believes that his epilepsy is a sign that he is letting demons inside his soul and body, and he suspects that those demons have been getting in because of the boy's masturbating. Although from what we can tell, the boy has not been masturbating, and the father masturbates to Victorian era or such kind of pornography. And then there is, so epilepsy, there's this concept that there's this god of tremors. Now, whether the god is really in communication with the boy, or if the poor boy being tortured by his father, etc., is just imagining it all, it seems like this weird statue really is in the woods on their English estate. It doesn't seem like something you'd find in England. Maybe, I don't know. So that's the god of tremors. But it's a really good comic, really good art. Disturbing kind of story. I think it's easier to take because it's set several hundred years ago, I guess 200 years ago, and it has that kind of, maybe 150 years ago. It has that kind of sense of, we all know better now. We don't flog and beat our children for having epilepsy. But still, pretty powerful stuff. And in a way, I wanted a little more at the end, some extra beat or something. I was glad that there was kind of a happy ending, but I also wanted, and Peter Milligan tried to put something in to kind of give you a little afterword, but somehow I wanted a little extra something. It might have been my number 1 comic, but I was just left wanting a little something and not even knowing what it was. At number 2 is Savage Hearts number 2. I loved Savage Hearts number 1, so I guess I need to find more comics by Aubrey Stitterson, the writer. And the art is quite wonderful by Jed Dougherty and colorist Laverne Kinders. I never know how to say his name. Kinzierski. Always has been a favorite colorist of mine for about 10 years since I started paying attention to color. He used to do a lot more work at DC, but you don't see him there anymore. Very, very bright colors here, but it goes really well with the story, and the art never really misses a beat in kind of the humorous, exotic setting. And we have a development in our relationships between all our characters here, and it's quite satisfying while being very funny and having that kind of fantasy sword and sorcery vibe to it too, and a feeling of kind of maybe Greek mythology. I don't know, since our main character is this kind of satyr-like creature. There's a good shot of him. Seems to be in the dark here a lot. There he is. He's a very likable, and there's a lot of fun language and everything like that in here. So this could easily have been my number one, but in the end, I loved Jupiter's Legacy Requiem. I'm not sure why it's called a Requiem, except that it's probably intended to be the last volume, I guess, of Jupiter's Legacy. What exactly is a Requiem? Kind of a remembrance of something that's past or dead? I think it's originally a musical term, but I'm not sure. Maybe it applies to other things. But anyway, it may turn out differently when it wraps up, but I think out of all the Jupiter's Legacy books that I've read the main ones. The other ones were drawn by Frank Quitely. But I think this art by Tommy Lee Edwards, which looks like Tommy Lee Edwards, but at a different level because he's doing his own coloring, and he's totally integrated the coloring as part of his art, even though he's someone who's, kind of famous for his dark lines and very inky kind of art. He's taken the coloring and he's taken to it in a really good way. No doubt it was all done digitally, but it still really holds up for me. So it brings the story up to a very high level, and it's a very intriguing story. I like these stories of, let's take the superheroes and then push them down the road and look at some other aspect of what superheroes might really be like. And on top of that, Mark Millar's kind of adding to the mythos of this superhero world and universe, and introducing more and more ideas about who originally gave who the Jupiter's Legacy comes from. So my only fear while reading it is that it's probably like all the other Millar comics, probably will end in 6 issues. And is that enough to fully explore all the kind of different threads that he's opened up here and different ideas that we're exploring? But at the moment, I'm really excited about this comic. I was not expecting to be. I almost didn't, pick up Jupiter's Legacy Requiem, but I had enjoyed the previous ones, and I think I got a peek at the art, and that was enough, and I'm really glad I did. So yeah, a lot of different kinds of coloring, and I've noticed a lot of artists who do their own coloring who do kind of a lousy job and somehow miss the point of what coloring can do to add to their storytelling. But then sometimes artists pick up on doing their own color and do just an amazing job. Either way, good coloring is really important to me. I think this had lettering that I like too. The letterer here was John Workman, and it was not afraid to, have various different sizes. It was not too afraid, not feeling it had to be really restrained, which I feel like a lot of lettering these days does. And I liked that it was more sort of expressive. I also like, I think it's important to have lettering where there's a lot of space in the balloons or caption boxes around the lettering. I think that really helps a lot. Okay, so as I almost always do, I had a fun time reading all these comics. And tomorrow, as I record this is like late night Tuesday. Tomorrow I'll be picking up some more comics, and we'll see where I go from there. And hope you have been having a great comic book reading week. Bye-bye.
I'm getting terrible cramps in my legs.
Good. Terrible cramps. Exactly, Robin. The involuntary muscular contractions in Batgirl's legs may indirectly relieve the tension in your lower lumbar region.
Holy slip disc.
Not quite, Robin. If I can wiggle my ears, and if you are able to bend the 4th finger on your left hand just a fraction of an inch,
You might strangle us all.
release this, Batgirl. It's the basic formula for escaping from the Siamese human knot. I just recalled it. Ready? Ready, Robin? Ready. I'm beginning to wiggle my ears under my cowl. All right. Release you with a finger. I'm wiggling.